Well, hello everybody. Welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson. My friends, the Supreme Court has been battered and bruised ever since its inception, ever since it was prescribed to exist in the Constitution. Indeed, as the court has matured in its history, it has gone from ruling on first principles and dealing with matters of principle, investigating the nature of the Constitution, the nature of the functions the Constitution laid out, as what happened in Marbury versus Madison, where instead of there being several references to case law, there were actually references to the functions of the various branches of government, the phraseology of the Constitution, and what can be deduced logically from all of those things. Now, obviously, Marbury versus Madison was the very first Supreme Court case, so you wouldn't have a lot of case law, but the point is the same. Principles remain forever. Principles are constant. Even if society tends to develop beyond them, if society really can't develop beyond them unless it risks its own destruction. But ever since the court got wrapped up into this nonsense of stare decisis, where they're going to honor precedent because for the sake of it being precedent, as opposed to seeing if precedent has any moral or constitutional merit to it, ever since this has happened, and the court has sought to expand and sink its tentacles into various facets of life where it does not have the moral sanction to do so, it has gone downhill. And now that the court is reversing, or this iteration of the court is reversing that very dangerous trend that was started so many years ago and passed through the hands of so many different justices who wanted to remake the country in their image, who wanted to remake what the law meant in their image, who wanted to abandon foundations for trends and fashions. Ever since this Supreme Court right now said with the Roe v. Wade case that we will not do that. We are going to do what the Constitution says. We are going to stick to the letter of the Constitution. We're not going to interpret and bring our own perspectives in. Ever since they said that with this Roe v. Wade opinion, majoritarian nutters, majoritarian fools, acolytes have been congregating to attack and assail the Supreme Court. And I'm not just talking about protesters, which I'll get to in a moment. I'm also talking about people who inherit the institution of Congress, people who upon entering Congress swore upon the Bible or whatever other text they swore upon in the Constitution to uphold and defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Those are the very same people now advocating for the butchering of the Constitution and the butchering of the principles contained therein that constitute the foundations and the functions of SCOTUS in every other branch of government, every other facet of those branches of government. After the leaked opinion came out, several politicians, like Elizabeth Warren, like Ed Markey, like Ilhan Omar, all of them sung the same chord, the same foul chord. It's not merely enough to pass federal legislation to codify Roe, which would essentially mean trampling on a state's ability to govern themselves, which is a violation of federalism, the principles thereof, which have allowed this country to maintain itself for so many years. But they also said we must expand the court. Expand the court for what reason? If you expand the court in one direction, you could have more conservatives. And if they really want to just expand the court for the sake of having more opinions on the court, you may have the outcome you don't like. They want to expand the court and pack them with ideologues who cater to their every whim. My friends, hear me when I say this to you. I'm not being hyperbolic. The institutions of this great nation are under assault, and the institution of the Supreme Court particularly is under assault. And we as Americans, or whoever else you are watching this, we have an imperative to ensure the passions of faction, as Madison put it in the Federalist Papers, are checked. My friends, what you're seeing from Warren, Markey, Omar, what you're seeing from protesters and activist groups, many of whom have bombed pro-life advocacy centers, and many of whom are now going in front of the houses of the Supreme Court justices and intimidating them. And we've seen this happen with Amy Coney Barrett. There were people going in front of her house wearing Handmaid's Tales outfits. Watch here. Then we have Samuel Alito. There were protests on his house. Then we have Brett Kavanaugh. There were protests at his house. All of these justices, and now Ruth Sent Us, which is the group, one of the groups that is behind this agitation, has now announced a walk by Wednesday where they go to the houses of all 6 conservative Supreme Court justices to protest them. And this same group, Ruth Sent Us, recently organized a protest at Nancy Pelosi's mansion. And the purpose for that protest, in their words, was to tell Manchin tell Nancy Pelosi. Not Manchin, tell Nancy Pelosi to, and I quote, investigate the corrupt justices and save abortion. Corrupt because they're doing their job. Save abortion by trampling upon federalism. In other words, destroy the foundations of this nation. My friends, this impulse that we're seeing from Warren, Markey, Omar, and other people of that sort, and from these protesters who are going around and trying to make these institutions bow to their very whim by force, these impulses we're seeing are nothing more than a result of a democracy. Nothing more than the result of the majority being overrun with passions and using that passion and that fervor to inflict their will upon the rest of the country. Our institutions, my friends, were constituted and built such as they are because they were meant to act as safeguards against the wills of anyone who would seek to contravene the rights that all of us have bound up in our human DNA. Our institutions, my friends, are essentially buffers, walls. They are essentially filtration systems that keep out all the dirt and grime of individual subjective opinions from impacting people in a legal way and also impacting people in a social way. So just like someone cannot or should not be able to infringe upon your life or your rights through government, nor should they be able to do so by coming up to your house, pointing a gun at you and saying, do what I say. Government was meant, and the institutions are meant to check those impulses. But now we have people inhabiting those very institutions who are run and who are possessed by those impulses and are willing to use them and the levers of our own institutions against itself. We have parasitically minded people willing to tear down this experiment of America. But my friends, there's another thing as well. America's institutions were fundamentally built upon cooperation, and from cooperation flows intelligent thought, and from intelligent thought flows more and more possibilities, dynamism, complexity, the spice of life. Cooperation is actually a natural principle. If you look at any other system in reality, whether it be the water cycle, whether it be ecosystems and jungles, things in those systems, parts of those systems are all interdependent. They all cooperate. They're independent in their functioning as units, right? A lion is not the same thing as a leopard or as a giraffe or a zebra, but they all operate in the same system and they all help each other, depending on where those animals are. Similarly, reality is built upon that kind of mutual cooperation, and human existence is no different. And yet, when that principle is rejected for force, and primarily simply for force, the fundamental organizing principle of reality is threatened. And when that happens, chaos ensues, entropy happens, decay happens, atrophy happens. If people in society today simply said we're not going to cooperate or leave each other alone or go to work or start our businesses or do anything, there would be complete and total collapse. Not because we have made it that way, but because human existence sustains itself upon the collective, interdependent, simultaneously interacting geniuses of people in a society. The Supreme Court is an extension of that principle. I don't want you guys to simply say, well, Christians speak in common sense. I'm trying to get you guys to understand something here. While this may be common to some people, many people don't understand or don't want to appreciate just how deep this stuff goes. Many people think that it's all about power. I've heard this phrase several times. Well, for the leftist Christian, it's all about power. No. Power itself is merely a tool, like a hammer. Reverse that sentence. What if you said it's all about a hammer? What does that mean? A hammer is only as good as the direction or the task it is aimed towards, and power is only as good as the task or direction it is aimed towards. Anyone can inhabit power. 10 people can inhabit power and use that same power differently for different purposes. So no, it's not about power. It's about value systems and value structures. That's what it's about. And this idea that we can understand what's going on right now in our society simply by looking at power and privilege or whatever is a very reductive, simple-minded idea. And if any of you within the sound of my voice or believe that stuff, hear me out and please reject that foul thinking. What we have here are intellectual forces that have been at play for decades, coming to roost. Force creates nothing. Power creates nothing. Power simply hijacks the wills or tries to hijack and use the wills of other people towards a particular advantage. But the constituent part of that is the wills of other people. Without other people or someone to execute the objectives that your power is being used towards, power is impotent, which goes back to the individual. Once again, which is why people, being the constituent factor of society, it is important that people have a virtuous and pure mindset. And unfortunately, as the founders understood, when people inhabit a society don't have a virtuous mindset, destruction ensues. We're seeing that happen right now. Defending SCOTUS is not simply about defending an originalist interpretation of the Constitution, which we should defend, by the way, or a textualist one. Defending SCOTUS is about defending the organizing principles of our country, as well as the organizing principles of reality by which we all inhabit it peaceably and coherently. Think of SCOTUS and American institutions as a river. A river starts at the very top of a mountain sometimes. Sometimes it starts from glacier, sometimes it starts from rain. And it has a lot of energy at first, and it goes downstream. And there will be different areas like creeks and basins that will come together from different water flows, and they'll form into a tributary. And that tributary will then flow downstream. This is the youthful stage of a river. And they'll sometimes be have white water rapids in the form of tributary, or you'll have waterfalls. They're all little processes of tributaries. And then those go down to a landfill, and then the river continues its life. Imagine SCOTUS as a river, and American institutions as a river. Because they are a continuously refreshing thing, but they have a stable core to them. A river's organizing principle is movement. In order for a river to be a river, to bear fruit, it has to move. If a river had no movement in it at all, the life within it would most likely not be able to exist. If a river had no movement and there was nothing moving, nothing coming into the river, it would ultimately not exist anymore. Rivers require movement from several different sources. And the entire basis of a river is that it'll eventually move from the narrow to the wider to the incredibly wide, which is going to be an estuary or an ocean. And all of a sudden, it is absorbed into this vast sea that constitutes over 70% of the planet. Our institutions in this country are just like that. Because the river is part of the water cycle, and the water cycle is a continuous process by which the waters of the world and the earth and the ecosystems of the earth are refreshed and replenished. And the river is simply one part of that whole process. The organizing principle of the court is the interpretation of the Constitution. And that process is ever renewing and it's dynamic. And it'll look different. It may have different character in the hands of different people. But here's the point. The point is, just like the river, our institutions need to stay and pay heed to their original organizing principle. Because just like the river, if there's no movement, there will ultimately be a lack of dynamism and death. And if there is no movement and respect for the foundational principles of our institutions, they won't be able to function, and they can easily become hijacked by any political faction that bears any belief, whether it be a good belief or a bad belief, I don't care, mechanism is important, that bears any belief whatsoever, and can then use those institutions to impose the beliefs upon everybody else who may agree or may not agree, but impose them by force. This country does not sustain itself off force. It sustained itself off of cooperation. That's the battle here. It's not between the powerful and the weak. It's the battle between those who want to use power to dictate their views upon you and those who want to simply make sure power is checked and kept within its proper parameters so that it will never be able to monstrously consume us all. Because when it can do that, we no longer have an institution, we no longer have a society, a civilization, and I dare say we no longer have a country. Think on it. My friends, if you want to support me, please go to my Patreon, patreon.com/PhilCWatson or PayPalOfficialCWatch@gmail.com. Please be sure to come to my Discord if you want to talk to me. Discord is in my comment section down below. Please be sure to like and share this video, subscribe to this channel. This message is dynamite. My friends, I love you guys so much, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.